It was supposed to be just another afternoon in front of the cameras, bright lights, a well-timed laugh track, and that familiar hum of a show that knew its rhythm. American Spotlight was live, airing from its Manhattan studio with over 200 audience members filling the room. Everything was bathed in a careful glow, every microphone calibrated to perfection, and every transition timed to the second. From the control booth to the host's cue cards, the entire segment was built for polish. Karoline entered from stage right like she had done this 100 times before. She wore a red blazer that caught the light just right, her hair sharp, smile tighter than confidence. It was certainty. She didn't hesitate as she reached her seat, greeted the host, and turned just slightly to acknowledge Jasmine, seated quietly beside her. From the outset, Karoline commanded the space. Her stories hit their beats effortlessly. She dropped punchlines with practiced rhythm, pausing at just the right moments to allow for laughter and applause. When she answered questions, her tone was relaxed, but authoritative. She made the audience lean in. She knew how to read them. Jasmine remained calm, her presence still. She wore black, no jewelry, no flair, just silence. She didn't interrupt. She didn't shift in her seat. She watched. When the host brought up divisions among youth in modern America, Karoline shrugged slightly, like she was brushing away the seriousness of the topic. "It's simple," she said. "Some grow up with values. Some just grow up inside a system." The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. A few people laughed, others nodded, and Karoline let the moment stretch just long enough before folding her hands and glancing at Jasmine with something like amusement. The host followed with an open-handed gesture. "Jasmine, what do you think of that comment?" Jasmine didn't miss a beat. Her voice was soft, even, yet unwavering. "That line wasn't meant for me." A silence settled, not heavy, but enough to notice. Karoline smirked faintly. She was winning, at least by the traditional scorecard of cable talk shows. She leaned forward slightly, confident the game was hers to play. From there, the host gave her more airspace. Karoline's answers became longer, her pace quicker, her jabs sharper, but always wrapped in smiles and casual tone. The audience followed. They laughed more often. Even when she dropped in subtle provocations, it felt like no one minded. That was the illusion. Then came the first unspoken shift. "I think," she said, eyes flicking to the camera, "sometimes people get invited on TV not because they have something worthwhile to say, but because they look like the kind of story media wants to tell." She didn't say Jasmine's name. She didn't need to. Jasmine didn't respond. Instead, she reached out gently and set her pen down on the glass table, the sound almost imperceptible, like the quiet tick of a second hand on a clock. Something about the movement felt deliberate. And just then, the camera, which had stayed on the two women all evening, panned across the studio audience, briefly. Less than a second. Long enough to catch a figure in the third row. But no one noticed. Karoline didn't either. The show moved forward. The host asked another question, this time about female politicians and the way the media misrepresents them. His tone was breezy, almost chasing a chuckle. "Karoline, have you ever felt misunderstood just for being a woman?" She tilted her head, amused. "Oh, of course," she said. "But I get misunderstood more for not apologizing for what I believe." There was laughter again. Another round of applause. A young woman in the front row nodded. A man in the back tapped a note into his phone. But something had changed. Even the audience, still reacting with momentum, felt it. Karoline was still smiling, but her confidence now had an edge to it, a coolness that wasn't there before. Her eyes started to glance sideways, toward Jasmine. Still checking. Still seeing if the silence was holding. To us. Jasmine didn't respond. But her gaze had shifted. Not toward Karoline. Not toward the host. Outward. Toward someone. And though it wasn't immediately clear who she was looking at, that direction mattered. And again, no one paid attention to the man in the third row. No name card. No title announced. Just a gray suit and a small pin with 3 stars, one of them darkened. His posture was upright. Hands folded loosely in his lap. No reaction, no expression. But Jasmine had seen him. And that meant something. Another question came. This one framed to Karoline with a political undertone. What do you think about people who say they don't feel heard in today's system? Karoline paused only a moment. I think everyone has the right to feel disadvantaged, she began slowly. But sometimes I wonder if they're truly being left behind, or if the road was paved for them and they just think it's still not enough. This time, the chuckles were fewer. She didn't notice. She kept going. There are people, I think, who step into politics not because of conviction, but because they fit the moment, fit the campaign, fit the image media wants to paint. Not because they're qualified, but because they're the right color. And then, just like that, she laughed. I mean, I'm just kidding. A faint chuckle echoed, but it wasn't from confidence, it was discomfort. The kind people do when they feel like they're supposed to laugh but aren't sure if they should. The host paused. His smile faltered, not quite knowing what to say. He pivoted to Jasmine. Jasmine, would you like to respond to that? Jasmine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Karoline. A long pause. Then she turned toward the audience. Her eyes settled on someone. The camera followed. This time, the image was unmistakable. The man in the third row. Older. Composed. Gray suit. The same pin. His eyes, calm but firm, had not moved from Karoline since the moment she spoke that line. Not once. He didn't move. He didn't nod. He didn't glare. But something about the stillness of his gaze pulled the entire room into a new reality. The air felt different, tight, cold, suspended. Jasmine placed her hand on the table. No tapping this time. Just a light, steadying touch. And then she said it. My father is sitting in this room today. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't grandstanding. It was a statement, clear, declarative. The audience turned. Slowly. Collectively. He didn't flinch. His back remained straight. His gaze fixed. And Karoline turned too. Her eyes locked with his. For 3 seconds, maybe less, maybe more, time seemed to slip into something else. And for the first time all evening, Karoline didn't speak. The host said nothing. No one did. It wasn't just silence. It was presence. Thick, motionless. And then came the first fracture in the rhythm. Jasmine continued. I grew up in a family where my father was asked every single day, "Where are you from?" And when he answered, "I was born here," they followed with, "No, where are you really from?" No music swelled. No interruption. Her words were steady. And today, when a woman says, "I'm only here because I look right," in front of him, maybe you think it's a joke. But to us, it's an old wound. One that never fully healed. Jasmine didn't cry. Her voice didn't shake. She just looked ahead, calm, unwavering. Karoline made a move to speak. A lean forward. The beginning of something. But the camera didn't shift back to her. Not anymore. The audience wasn't there to be entertained now. They had become witnesses. The kind that don't need to speak to remember what they saw. The silence didn't dissolve, it spread. It hung above the set like static in the air, invisible but undeniable. The kind of stillness you don't script, don't plan for, and certainly can't recover from with a commercial break. The live feed didn't cut. The audience wasn't shifting. No one was whispering. Even the control room, known for its endless chatter and countdowns, had gone quiet. Jasmine sat still, one hand resting lightly on the glass table. Her posture was firm, not defensive, deliberate. The light from the overhead rig cast a faint shimmer across her black blazer, catching the edge of her sleeve. Her eyes hadn't left the audience. Karoline across from her blinked. Just once. But in that blink, the rhythm, the one she'd controlled so flawlessly, was gone. The host cleared his throat. Quietly. More reflex than recovery. I thank you, Jasmine, he offered, not with confidence, but with caution. He wasn't sure if he should move the conversation forward, or let the moment stretch even further. And more than that, he was no longer in charge of the tone in the room. Jasmine was. Karoline sat back in her chair. Her smile had faded. Not completely, just enough to show the effort it now took to keep it. She laced her fingers together in her lap, as though trying to stabilize herself. Well, she started, I think we're all sensitive to the times right now. I didn't mean anything personal. Just making a point about how narratives are shaped. Jasmine didn't interrupt. She didn't even look at Karoline. Instead, she adjusted her posture ever so slightly, shoulders back, chin lifted. Her voice came again, soft but crisp. "I know what point you were making." The host interjected with the energy of someone trying to rescue a segment before it capsizes. "Let's zoom out a little," he said, gesturing vaguely with his hands. "There's a lot of talk right now about identity, privilege, and who gets to be heard. Karoline, Jasmine, what's the balance between free speech and responsible dialogue?" It was a wide-open invitation. One meant to soften the edges, to return things to safer ground. Karoline took it first. "I believe in free speech." "Totally," she said, her voice regaining a bit of pace. "But we've reached a point where honest opinions get labeled as hate, and silence gets interpreted as complicity. If everything offends someone, then no one can speak honestly." Applause followed. Lighter than before, but still present. Karoline looked out at the audience, visibly relieved to hear them again. But Jasmine didn't clap. Didn't move. When the applause faded, she responded, not as a rebuttal, but as an anchor. "It's not that everything offends us," she said. "It's that we've learned to recognize when something dangerous is being dressed as casual opinion." That landed heavier than any applause. Karoline shifted in her seat. "You're twisting my words," she replied quickly, her voice a touch sharper. "You're implying I said something dangerous when I was talking about perceptions, media strategies, campaign tactics." Jasmine's gaze turned to her, finally. "Steady. You said I was only here because I look like the kind of story the media wants to tell." "That's not," Karoline began, but the words stumbled. "You didn't say my name," Jasmine continued, "but you didn't need to. You've made a career of doing this, of suggesting without directly accusing. That way, when someone pushes back, you get to say they're being sensitive." The room didn't breathe. Even the audience seemed unsure how to respond. The kind of tension where you don't look away, but you don't look directly at anyone either. From the third row, Jasmine's father remained still. His hands hadn't moved. His eyes never left the stage. Karoline drew in a breath. She was calculating now, less sure, more guarded. "You're right, Jasmine," she said finally. "I didn't say your name. Because this wasn't about you personally. It's about how certain institutions promote certain voices, how they prop people up based on image over merit. If anything, it's a critique of the system." "But you personalized it," Jasmine replied immediately. "Because it's easier to make your argument sound neutral when you're standing next to someone who fits your exact description. That's not a system critique. That's a performance." The host made another attempt to deflect. "Okay, let's take a beat here," he said, turning toward the audience. "I think it's fair to say we've entered some intense territory. But I want to remind everyone, this is a conversation. We invited both of you here to offer different perspectives and—" Jasmine interrupted. "Not with volume. With clarity. You invited me here because you thought I would stay silent." The words hit harder than anything so far. The audience reacted, not loudly, but with unmistakable stillness. Some shifted in their seats. Others looked down. A few looked toward the control booth, as if waiting for someone to make a decision. The host froze. For once, he didn't know how to pivot. Karoline opened her mouth, then closed it again. The man in the third row adjusted his cuff. One small motion, but it felt deliberate. Like even he was registering that this moment wasn't like others. That something irreversible had just happened in the studio. Jasmine leaned forward just slightly. "I've had to watch people like you speak for me my entire life," she said. "In classrooms. In boardrooms. On panels just like this. You ask for our thoughts, but only if they don't challenge yours. And when they do, you call them aggressive, or ungrateful, or political." Karoline didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to say. The audience didn't applaud. The host looked to the side, as though someone off stage might signal what to do next. But no one moved. No one wanted to break the moment. Because deep down, they knew this wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a reckoning. And Jasmine wasn't asking to be heard. She was demanding it. The stage lights dimmed, but no one moved. No one dared. It wasn't out of fear or confusion. It was reverence towards something that had just unfolded, something that didn't fit in the category of a segment anymore. Jasmine sat still, her back straight, her hands loosely placed on the glass table. The faint sound of a microphone being powered down crackled in the distance, but she didn't flinch. Karoline, across from her, had stopped trying to read the room. She had given up on regaining control, not because she was silenced, but because she had, for the first time, nothing left to say. The man in the third row, the one no one had named, no one had introduced, remained seated now. After rising, standing in complete stillness, and then slowly returning to his seat, he became the center around which the rest of the room turned. He hadn't spoken a single word. He didn't need to. The air around him had shifted, and with it, everyone's perception. The cameras, though technically off-air, were still recording. Someone backstage had chosen not to cut away. As if intuitively understanding, whatever this was, it deserved to stay whole. An assistant producer whispered to the host, "Do we move on?" But the host didn't respond. His eyes were lowered, fixed on the surface of the cue cards he hadn't touched in several minutes. He looked smaller now, less like the moderator of a national broadcast and more like someone who'd just been handed a truth he didn't expect to carry. Finally, Jasmine spoke, not to anyone specifically, not even to Karoline. "I used to think I understood my father," she said softly, her voice steady. "Until one day, I overheard my mother call him an educated houseboy, not out of insult, but because she was repeating what someone had once called him while he was serving overseas in uniform." No music played beneath her words. No dramatic lighting cues or zoom-ins. Just silence. The kind that listens. "I asked him later why he never told me that story," Jasmine continued, eyes fixed ahead. "And he said, because I didn't want you to carry bitterness. I wanted you to carry light." A soft exhale was heard from somewhere in the audience. It wasn't emotion, it was memory, triggered, uninvited, but undeniably real. Jasmine's gaze drifted slowly to Karoline. "You said earlier that some of us are only here because we fit the story. You said it with a laugh and you called it a joke. But my father heard you. And so did I." Karoline didn't respond. Not with a smile, not with defiance. Her fingers were curled around the chair's armrest, her knuckles pale. For the first time, she looked like someone rethinking the story she believed she was telling. Jasmine went on, quieter now. "I used to think my father was too gentle, that he forgave too easily. But when I was 16, I watched him testify during a land rights hearing. He was the only black man in the room, and he didn't tremble. He didn't raise his voice. He just told the truth." She paused. Not dramatically, but to let the room absorb it. "I asked him afterward if he was afraid. And he said, 'I'm not afraid of their silence. I'm afraid of mine.'" That line didn't need emphasis. It didn't need reaction. It simply landed, like a stone gently placed on a still surface. The camera focused again on the third row. The man, Jasmine's father, remained still, his posture unchanged. But for the first time, he smiled. Not broadly, just slightly, like someone who had heard what needed to be said and knew it had finally been heard. Karoline leaned slightly forward. She didn't try to reclaim the narrative. She didn't apologize. But her posture had softened, as if she finally realized how tightly she'd been holding her version of truth, and how incomplete it had been. The host tried to speak but stopped himself. The usual segues felt hollow now. So Jasmine continued. "When I entered politics," she said, "my father didn't celebrate. He didn't say, 'Congratulations.' He said, 'You won't be undone by cruelty. You'll be undone by the things people say as if no one's listening.'" And then, for the first time, she turned directly to the camera. "But today, someone said it was just a joke. Please remember, every joke has an audience. And sometimes that audience is the one who never speaks." A visible shift moved through the crowd, not in sound, but in energy. Some people sat straighter. Others lowered their gaze. It wasn't shame. It was reckoning. Karoline lowered her head slightly. Not to surrender, not to dramatize, but because she knew she had looked without really seeing. And now she did. 12 hours later, the clip was online. Not a cut version, not repackaged, just the full uninterrupted moment. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet. And because of that, it traveled deeper. A journalism student reposted it first with the caption, "Not because she was strong, but because she didn't ask us to cry." Then a father in Georgia commented under the same post, "I used to laugh at those lines. Now I tell my son to never say something without knowing who's in the room." It spread like a whisper. Not viral. Not trending. Just persistent. On Reddit, someone called it, "The moment privilege realized it wasn't invisible." Another simply wrote, "He stood up. And everything changed." No headlines. No pundits. Just the quiet turning of a page. A week later, in a high school classroom in Chicago, a social studies teacher played the entire clip. No assignment. No grading rubric. Just one handwritten prompt. What makes someone change a room without saying a word? One student answered, "Because he was a father." Another wrote, "Because silence doesn't always mean approval. Sometimes it's just holding the truth until someone's ready." A Vietnamese-American girl replied, "Because for the first time, I saw a black man not being asked to explain himself." Karoline didn't appear on television for a few days. She wasn't canceled. No outrage campaign followed her. No publicist spin. She simply didn't show up. When asked on a later podcast if there was anything she regretted from that year, she paused. 3 seconds. Then answered, "I wish I'd known a father was sitting in that room." No applause. Just silence. And no one skipped ahead. In a small independent bookstore in Atlanta, a printed photo of the man standing in the third row was taped behind the checkout desk. No caption. Just his posture. Present. When asked why, the owner said, "Because I want people to fall quiet when they see it." And they did. Later that month, Jasmine posted only one thing. A photo taken backstage. Her father was sitting alone under the hallway light, hands resting calmly, no phone in sight. The caption read, "He didn't need to be believed. He just needed to be seen." It didn't go viral. But it stayed. Because that's what truth does.